What if the secret you've guarded your whole life suddenly becomes public knowledge in front of hundreds of powerful people? How do you choose between the empire you've built and the man who holds your heart? Can one moment of honesty shatter your world only to rebuild it stronger than before? Alexander Harrington stood at the head of the long mahogany table inside the glass-walled conference hall on the 42nd floor of Vanguard Tech's headquarters in downtown Manhattan. Sunlight streamed through the floor-to-ceiling windows, casting sharp shadows across the faces of 200 shareholders, analysts, and board members who had flown in from across the country. At 42, Alexander was the definition of American corporate success. Tall frame, sharp jawline, salt and pepper hair styled with precision, and a tailored charcoal suit that fit like armor. He had taken Vanguard from a struggling startup in a Brooklyn garage to a tech giant valued at $12 billion. Today should have been another victory lap, another set of record earnings to applause. He clicked the remote to advance his slides, the projector humming softly. Quarterly revenue up 23%. Market share expanding in AI-driven software. The room nodded in approval. Then Victor Lang, the silver-haired board member who had never hidden his ambition to replace Alexander as CEO, rose from his seat at the far end of the table with a thin smile that didn't reach his eyes. Before we wrap up the financials, Victor announced, voice carrying across the microphones, I believe the shareholders deserve full transparency on leadership matters. A short video has come into my possession that sheds light on our CEOs. Private affairs. The screen behind Alexander flickered to life. The footage was grainy yet unmistakable, shot from across a dimly lit Italian restaurant in Soho 2 weeks earlier. Alexander and Malik Rivera sat at a corner table, heads close, laughing at something only they understood. Then the moment, Malik leaned in, and Alexander met him halfway in a tender kiss that lingered just long enough to leave no doubt. Gasps rippled through the hall like a wave. Phones were already recording. Whispers turned into audible questions. Is the CEO gay? Did we know about this? Alexander's stomach dropped as if the floor had vanished. His mind raced through every precaution he had taken over 2 years, separate entrances, coded texts, never appearing together in public. How had Victor obtained the video? A hidden camera? A paid waiter? The room spun. He caught the shocked stares of the institutional investors who controlled billions in Vanguard stock. His heart pounded so loudly he could barely hear the rising murmurs. In that frozen second, Alexander's thoughts flew back to the night he first met Malik. It had been at a charity gala in Los Angeles 3 years ago, an event Vanguard sponsored for LGBTQ youth programs. Alexander had attended only for the optics, shaking hands and writing checks while keeping his distance from anything personal. Malik, then a rising marketing strategist at a rival firm, had approached him during the silent auction with a confident smile and a question about AI ethics that sparked a 2-hour conversation. By the end of the night, they had exchanged numbers under the pretense of business. 6 months later, after stolen weekends and late-night calls, they admitted what they both felt. Malik, 32, with warm brown eyes, wavy dark hair, and a creative spark that lit up every room, had become the one person who saw Alexander beyond the corner office. But Alexander had insisted on secrecy. His parents back in rural Ohio still sent him church bulletins and asked when he would settle down with a nice woman. The board was filled with traditionalists who valued image above innovation. The tech world could be ruthless. One wrong headline and contracts vanished. So they lived in shadows. Malik's apartment in Brooklyn for quiet evenings, Alexander's penthouse in Tribeca for rare weekends when the world wasn't watching. Now the shadow was gone. Victor crossed his arms, waiting for the denial he expected. Alexander gripped the edge of the podium, knuckles white. The weight of every choice he had made pressed down on him. He could lie, call it doctored, threaten lawsuits. He could fire Victor on the spot and spin damage control. But as he scanned the room and saw faces ranging from disgust to confusion to hidden empathy, a different voice rose inside him, quiet yet insistent. The same voice that had whispered to him during sleepless nights beside Malik, enough. Alexander straightened, microphone in hand. Yes, he said, voice steady despite the tremor in his chest. The video is real. I am gay. The hall erupted. Chaos exploded immediately. Reporters in the back row surged forward, cameras flashing. Board members shouted questions over one another. One elderly investor from Texas slammed his fist on the table, demanding an emergency vote to remove Alexander. Victor leaned back with the satisfied look of a man who had just toppled a king. Alexander stood motionless, the microphone still warm in his palm, feeling the room tilt around him like a ship in a storm. Security escorted the most aggressive journalists out, but the damage was instant. Phones lit up across the country. Within minutes, Vanguard CEO trended on every platform. Alexander's assistant, Sarah Klein, a sharp-witted ally who had suspected the truth for months, slipped him a note. "Malik is in your office. He's watching the live stream." Alexander's chest tightened. Malik had been waiting upstairs, reviewing campaign decks for the new product launch, completely unaware that their private world had just become public property. As the meeting adjourned in disarray, Alexander walked through the corridor lined with framed awards, each one a reminder of the sacrifices he had made. His footsteps echoed louder than usual. In his office, Malik stood by the window, arms crossed, face pale. The younger man turned, eyes searching Alexander's. "You didn't deny it," Malik said softly, voice cracking with a mix of pride and fear. "You said it out loud." Alexander crossed the room in 3 strides and pulled Malik into a tight embrace, the first time he had ever done so inside these walls. "I couldn't lie anymore," he whispered against Malik's shoulder. "Not after seeing you in that video. Not after realizing how tired I am of hiding the best part of my life." They held each other for a long moment, the city humming far below. But reality intruded quickly. Alexander's phone buzzed nonstop, calls from investors, lawyers, his publicist. The stock price had already dropped 4% in after-hours trading. That evening, back at the penthouse overlooking Central Park, they sat on the couch with takeout Thai food untouched between them. Alexander replayed the moment in his head, the way Victor had smirked, the way some board members had looked away in discomfort. Malik listened, then spoke with quiet strength. "You built this company with your own hands, Alex. But you don't have to carry it alone anymore. Whatever you decide next, I'm here." Alexander nodded, but inside he felt the old fear returning. Losing the empire, losing his parents' respect, losing the respect of the industry he had conquered. Sleep came in fragments, haunted by visions of empty boardrooms and headlines screaming, "Vanguard's gay CEO." The next morning brought the first wave of consequences. His mother called from Ohio at 6 a.m., voice trembling. "Alexander James Harrington, tell me that video is fake. Your father saw it on the news. The whole town is talking." He tried to explain, but the line went silent after her whispered, "We raised you better than this." The rejection stung deeper than any stock dip. Meanwhile, supportive emails poured in from employees who had never dared speak up about their own identities. Sarah forwarded a petition from the junior staff asking for official LGBTQ support policies. Alexander stared at the screen, the seed of an idea beginning to form amid the wreckage. By midday, the media storm had intensified. Vans from every major network lined the street outside Vanguard's building. Alexander canceled all external meetings and locked himself in strategy sessions with his legal team. Victor had already circulated a memo calling for a special board vote within 48 hours to assess leadership fitness. The betrayal cut deep. Victor had once been a mentor when Alexander was a young founder. Now he was using personal prejudice as a weapon. Malik arrived at the office unannounced, dressed in a crisp button-down that made him look every bit the marketing genius he was. He had taken the day off from his own consulting gigs to stand beside Alexander. "You don't have to face them alone," he said in the elevator, squeezing Alexander's hand briefly before the doors opened. Inside the executive suite, tension crackled. Board members gathered in the private lounge, faces grim. One veteran director, Margaret Ellis, pulled Alexander aside. "I don't care who you love, son, but the optics are killing us. Investors are pulling out. Fix this quietly, or we all lose." Alexander listened, but the words felt hollow. Quietly fixing it meant going back into the closet, erasing Malik from his life in public. He thought of the nights they had spent talking about dreams, of Malik's stories about growing up in a supportive but modest family in California where being gay was never a secret. Contrast that with Alexander's Ohio upbringing, Sunday sermons warning against the lifestyle. the pressure to marry and produce grandchildren. The internal conflict had simmered for years. Now it boiled over. That afternoon, Alexander made the first public move. He released a short statement through the company channels. "I am gay, proud, and committed to leading Vanguard with the same integrity that built it. Personal matters will not interfere with our mission." The stock dipped another 2%, but the employee Slack channels exploded with messages of support. Malik read them over Alexander's shoulder, eyes shining. "See? You're already changing things just by existing out loud." Yet the personal toll mounted. Alexander's father left a voicemail, cold and final. "Don't come home until you've sorted yourself out." Friends from college texted awkward condolences. Even some allies distanced themselves, afraid of association. Malik noticed the strain and suggested a walk in Central Park after dark. Under the streetlights, they talked for hours. Malik shared his own fears. "I never wanted to be the reason you lost everything." Alexander stopped, turned to him, and said, "You're the reason I'm finally gaining something real." They shared a quiet kiss beneath the trees, the first truly public one, and for the first time Alexander felt the weight lift slightly. Back home, exhausted, Alexander opened his laptop and began drafting something bigger than damage control. A company-wide initiative, mandatory diversity training, an LGBTQ employee resource group, and a 10% profit pledge to youth shelters nationwide. He knew it would shock the board, risk short-term revenue, and possibly cost him the CEO title. But staring at the screen, he realized this was the decision forming in the chaos. Not retreat. Not apology. Forward. The boardroom confrontation the next morning was brutal. Victor presented a 20-page report detailing projected investor flight and legal risks. "This is not personal," he claimed, though everyone knew it was. "This is fiduciary duty." Alexander listened calmly, then slid his own proposal across the table. The room fell silent as they read. Full public coming out announcement, launch of Vanguard Pride initiative with dedicated funding, and a commitment to inclusive hiring at every level. "If we lose a few short-sighted investors," Alexander said evenly, "we'll gain loyalty from talent and customers who value authenticity. The data from other firms shows long-term gains in innovation and retention." Margaret Ellis raised an eyebrow, impressed despite herself. But Victor laughed bitterly. "You're gambling the company on your personal revelation." Arguments flew. Some directors supported the shift, citing generational change. Others threatened resignation. Alexander held firm, heart racing yet clearer than ever. He thought of Malik waiting downstairs in the lobby cafe, sipping coffee and texting encouragement. The support gave him courage he never knew he possessed. After the meeting adjourned without resolution, Alexander found Malik in the cafe. They walked to a nearby rooftop garden overlooking the Hudson. "I might lose the company," Alexander admitted, voice raw. Malik took his hand openly. "Then we'll build something new together. You've already won the hardest part, choosing yourself." They talked late into the afternoon about future possibilities, a life without constant hiding. Alexander described wanting to visit Malik's family in California openly, to finally introduce the man he loved. Malik smiled, eyes misty. "My mom already loves you from the stories I've told. She just didn't know your name until now." That evening, the announcement went live on Vanguard's website and social channels. Alexander recorded a 3-minute video in his office, Malik off camera for moral support. "Today I stand before you not just as CEO, but as a man who refuses to hide any longer," he said directly to the camera. The internet ignited. Support poured in from celebrities, other CEOs, and thousands of employees. Stock dipped initially, but stabilized as positive coverage highlighted the initiative's potential. Victor resigned in protest, taking 2 allies with him. Alexander felt the shift, power changing hands not through force, but through truth. Yet the internal battle wasn't over. Late that night, Alexander received a long email from his mother. It wasn't forgiveness, but a hesitant question, "Help me understand." He replied with honesty, attaching photos of him and Malik smiling at a quiet dinner. The response came hours later, a single line. "Call when you're ready." Small, but a crack in the wall. Weeks blurred into a new rhythm. Alexander stepped back from daily operations, appointing an interim leadership team while the board voted on the Pride initiative. The company experienced turbulence, Two major clients paused contracts, citing reputational concerns, but three new partners signed on specifically because of the diversity stance. Employee morale soared. Applications from top talent doubled. Malik took on a consulting role at Vanguard part-time, helping shape the marketing for the new programs. Their relationship deepened in the open light. They attended their first public event together, a charity gala, walking the red carpet hand in hand. Cameras flashed, but this time Alexander smiled. One weekend they flew to California to visit Malik's family. The warm welcome, home-cooked meals, and easy acceptance healed something in Alexander he hadn't realized was broken. Malik's mother hugged him tightly. "You've made my son happier than I've ever seen." Back in New York, Alexander's own parents finally agreed to meet via video call. The conversation was awkward, filled with long silences and careful questions, but it ended with his father muttering, "As long as you're happy, son." It wasn't full embrace, but it was progress. Internal conflicts still surfaced. Alexander grappled with guilt over the temporary layoffs in one underperforming division, wondering if his decision had accelerated them. Malik reminded him gently during a late-night conversation on the balcony. "Growth hurts sometimes, but staying hidden hurt you every single day." They argued occasionally, mostly about pacing. Malik wanted Alexander to slow down. Alexander feared losing momentum. One evening the tension peaked when Alexander snapped about a delayed campaign. Malik left for a walk, returning hours later with flowers and an apology. "I love you enough to fight for us, even when it's messy," he said. They reconciled on the couch, talking until dawn about the man Alexander was becoming. Less guarded, more present. Friendships evolved too. Sarah became a close confidant, organizing the first employee pride event. Another executive, a quiet, straight ally named Thomas, admitted his own brother was gay and thanked Alexander for making the company safer. These connections reinforced the larger truth. Authenticity created space for others. As the board finally approved the full initiative, Alexander stood on stage at the internal launch event. Malik watched from the front row, pride shining in his eyes. The applause that followed felt different, earned not through numbers, but through courage. 6 months later, Vanguard Tech reported its strongest quarter ever. The Pride initiative had attracted new partnerships worth hundreds of millions, employee retention hit record highs, and the stock had not only recovered, but climbed 15% above pre-outing levels. Alexander remained CEO, stronger in his role, because he no longer carried the weight of secrecy. He and Malik had moved in together officially, turning the Tribeca penthouse into a real home filled with shared books, weekend brunches, and plans for the future. One crisp autumn evening, Alexander took Malik to the same rooftop garden where they had talked during the crisis. The city lights glittered below like stars brought to earth. Alexander reached into his pocket and pulled out a simple platinum ring. "I built an empire once by hiding," he said, voice thick with emotion. "Now I want to build a life by being completely seen, with you." Malik's eyes filled as he accepted the ring. "Yes," he whispered. 1,000 times yes. They stood together, arms around each other, the wind carrying the distant sounds of the city. Alexander reflected on the journey, the terror of exposure, the pain of family rejection, the betrayal by Victor, the quiet strength Malik had shown every single day. None of it had been easy, yet every step had stripped away the fear and revealed who he truly was. The company continued to thrive under inclusive policies. Alexander mentored young LGBTQ executives, turning his once private struggle into public advocacy. Malik launched his own foundation supporting queer youth in tech. Their story, once hidden, now inspired countless others navigating similar paths. In the end, the greatest shock wasn't the outing or the decision. It was discovering that living truthfully didn't destroy the empire. It made both the man and the company unbreakable. Reflecting on Alexander and Malik's journey, it's clear that authenticity often demands courage beyond measure. The lesson here is that hiding who you are only prolongs the pain, while embracing your truth opens doors to genuine connections and unexpected triumphs. My advice is simple: never let fear dictate your path. Prioritize honesty with yourself and the people who matter. The right ones will stand beside you, and the life you build will be stronger than any secret ever could. Love, in all its honest forms, is always worth the risk.